live. Hello, everyone. This is a crowded room today, but a crowded room is just a nice room because you get to have all these great conversations. I am Bryant Francis. I'm contributing editor to Gamasutra. I'm joined today by two other folks from Gamasutra, and I'm also joined by Robin and Ben, who I'll give them a chance to introduce themselves in a moment. But first off, Chris and Hans, could you introduce yourselves?
Yeah.
Sure.
Go for it, Chris.
I'm Chris Graft, editor-in-chief of Gamasutra.com. I am a little bit tired. Way too tired for just a 2-day conference that happened. But I'm gonna pass it to you, Alex Walro.
Yeah, we're just coming off VRDC, which felt longer than a 2-day conference, which I guess is good. It's just a lot of stuff. My name is Alex Waro. I'm an editor at Gamasutra, and I'm very pleased to have two guests with us today.
Yeah.
So we got Robin.
That's right. That's me. I'm not Ben.
Yeah, we're still trying to get the intros down.
It's always so many people.
Yeah, and I'm actually on the board of VRDC, so I'm an advisory board member. So in addition to experiencing the conference as a speaker and as an attendee, I was also in kind of like, what are we doing that we could improve mode the whole time. So I'm also like, my head is filled with thoughts about the conference and the way we're concerned.
And you're co-founder, CEO, designer at Phenomena.
That's right.
Yeah.
Here in San Francisco, and I'm at the office today. So
nice.
Awesome.
And Ben, can you introduce yourself and your game?
And your cat.
Yeah, I'm Ben Vance. Been working in indie games and VR for a little while now. Working on an experience called Irrational Exuberance, and yes, where is he? Come here, buddy. This is Jones Davenport. He's special guest today.
Hey,
Jones Davenport?
Yeah.
Excellent.
That's like what my grandma calls the couch.
That's perfect.
Go sit on the Davenport.
Yes, exactly.
Okay. Well,
Sweet.
see you guys later. So, Robin, actually, you gave a talk at the Virtual Reality Developers Conference.
Yeah.
Can you talk about what you talked about a little bit?
Yeah, so Phenomena is an experimental gameplay studio. My last studio was TGC. I worked at TGC on Journey, and then after I finished Journey, I came back to San Francisco and started this company with my co-founder Martin. And we wanted to do sort of experimental games, but also at the sort of bleeding edge of technology and apparently also marketplaces. So we're doing an AR title, a VR title, and then a console title, looking at sort of what are the kinds of things we can experiment on in the space. And Luna, which is the game I was talking about on Tuesday, is a VR title and a PC title. And when we initially started it, it was just going to be PC, but we were going to use Intel gesture cameras to kind of control the experience. So the idea was that your camera would be looking at you from the computer and you'd be able to put your hands in front of it and touch the experience. And so I spent a lot of time designing this 2D, experience for actual tablets and PCs that would allow you to have this delicate touch. Mm-hmm. And then when controllers started coming out for VR headsets, I realized that we could probably do it in VR and also have embodied hands. So the talk, I talked about the transition from building a game that was supposed to be tactile, but on the PC, therefore rendered in a 2D screen with regular cameras, to a 3D.
Are you still with us? Whoops. Hey, I'm sorry. One One moment, I broke the stream. It's okay. I have a fix for this. This is fine. Sorry. No, it's okay. I'll have this fixed in one moment. Just give me a second. If I were to take this computer into the office, which is next to mine, which is the conference room, you just see that it's like littered with toys, and like I just even on my desk, like I have all these, Playmobil toys. Actually, I have Playmobil toys for every character in Luna. And then I've actually worked with the artists. We have like a hydrophilic sand bowl that we can shape and sculpt, and then we plant the toys in it, and then we like kind of block out the scenes in 3D using this like actual physical model of the space, which is definitely different than anything I've ever done before. Like even with Journey, which was a really immersive 3D game, most of the stuff that we talked about was camera angles and shots, and we would build the level, and you'd look down at the top of it when you were in Maya and stuff, and you'd think about how the player was going to experience it as a series of slices, In fact, actually, one of the things I really wanted to do, which we never got around to doing, was do an art show where people could make art that was a tribute to Journey out of sand, paper, stone, and wood. And my particular contribution was going to be a series of snapshots of the sand dunes as you move through the third level, just the different contours, like in a long row. So that
cool.
it would just be almost like this weird long sculpture that you could just walk past and see the different contours passing by. So give you that sense of time passing. But for this game, it's just been a very different experience. It's been really awesome.
Sorry.
Nice.
Okay, I fixed it.
Yay.
Sorry about that. You'll have.
Okay.
Did we get what Robin said?
No. Sorry. I'm sorry, Robin. If
Which part do you want me to repeat? Where did we lose me?
how about the bit about Alex was asking about Fantastic Beasts?
Let's just take it from the top.
Sorry.
It's totally fine.
Well, so I regret missing your talk at VRDC. I was at somewhere else, and I would love to know more about like what you were talking about in embodied game design and like your thoughts on bringing sort of virtual games into the very tactile, like real world.
Yeah, I mean, what I tried to talk about was the fact that you have this headset, you've got the hands and you've got the full body. And if you just do a couple of basic exercises with the controller, you can kind of get a grasp of what I'm talking about. So this is the touch controller, right? The touch controller and the Vive controller both have the same thing in common, which is that they have a power grip. So when you grab them, your hand is in a posture, like if you just take your hand and put it like this, that's a power grip. And the minute that you make a fist, you engage all the muscles in your upper arm and your lower arm, as well as your shoulder and your solar plexus and your chest. Like the actual act of making a fist and putting it in front of you is like, it actually makes you feel things in your body, right?
Okay.
And so the other example that I use is a precision grip. So a precision grip would be like this chalk pencil that I use to draw with. Or a brush, right? And if you actually pick up a pen or a pencil or a brush and you put it in front of you, the feeling of using a precision grip versus using a power grip is really different. And so the point that I made in my talk was, okay, now we have tilt brush, which allows you to paint with a power grip, which is it's a very strange feeling. It's like a meat fist almost, And so we've been trying in design of Luna in particular, but I think all of us that are working in VR, we're trying to figure out how to create feelings in players. And for me in particular, I really want people to feel like delicate feelings. I want them to feel delicate. Like I said, the game kind of started off as being gestural. And so I really want a precision grip feel, but the tools that I have are power grip tools.
Yeah.
So what do you do when you have a tool that creates a feeling that's the opposite of what you want your player to have? And so what I talked about in my talk, and I just had it here, there it is that we actually modeled a different kind of interaction. First, by simulating using the power grip to operate a pair of chopsticks. I have like a little pair of Hello Kitty chopsticks here. We made it so that that when you press the button on the top of the Vive controller, there were these two little chopsticks that were in front of you in the 3D space, and you could use them to pick up little squares. And it actually felt like delicate, even though you were holding this thing. When you press the button, your brain was thinking about the chopsticks, not the button. And so we ended up developing this model, a 3D model for this grasper that has 3 points. And then when you hold the touch controllers or the Vive controllers, and then you move in the space and you press the button, what you're actually seeing is this delicate grasper grasping things. And so I talked a lot about that in translation.
Why was it important to make the grasper a physical, like this, a physical thing? Why do you need it in real life?
Because when the artists were we were talking about what we wanted it to feel like, and I was like, it's almost like I want it to be like a little claw or a pedal or like the end of a brush. Like I want it to be that when you move in the space, it feels like, pointy, but not dangerous. And so we were trying to have that discussion and drawing pictures of it. And Glenn was just like, nah, this isn't working. And he went home and made this and brought it in. It was like, okay, this, right? And then we talked about it, and then the modeler made it.
Yeah,
so it was like one of those things where like, it's become more and more necessary for us to play with toys and physical things as a way of actually using words to describe what we want to build, which any game designer will tell you that's like the worst part about being a game designer, is that you see and feel things in your mind and your body that you want to give to players, and then you have to like write it down on a piece of paper or like go to someone's desk and be like,
that's how
it feels like a rainbow, but it's actually purple only. I don't know.
The consideration
it feels so dumb all the time.
The consideration for physicality, it's interesting because you giving that talk, it was kind of like, obviously you have to pay attention to what the player is doing in the real world, but it's not so obvious. Like people, it's really interesting. Like in your talk, you were talking about the act of reaching up and grabbing something, and it's such a simple consideration to like physicality, but it's not something that I think a lot of people are thinking about, because we're still in the state between like the flat screen and the virtual like world, that it's still so much around buttons, and a button can do something.
It's funny because I went and I played the HoloLens demos at VRDC, and I had this experiential like moment with one of the demos where I realized two very important things. One, most of the HoloLens demos, unfortunately, are about using UI with a finger tap and using that same finger tap to like shoot stuff, which is like little, there's nothing that feels worse than killing things by doing this in front of your eyes.
So
like
bad.
It's just, it doesn't feel good at all. It's just really bad. It's like, oh no, scorpion, quick.
Ben, have you killed any scorpions in AR?
What?
Yeah.
It's
That's
like
the flip side.
gesture. This is like, I'm crushing you. I'm crushing your head. Like it's a joke, Like it's just, I gotta kill those guys.
Can everyone just right now, everyone on this check?
So that was my first realization. But the other one was that there was actually a demo in there that unfortunately had a pretty violent image in it at the start. And it was an image of a grown man kind of holding a gun to the head of a child. And it was rendered in 3D in the room with me. And I was really taken aback by it because it was super triggering, but also like, then for the rest of the demo, every time I kind of turned that way, I had this fear that it was still there, that I was still going to see it, even though the game had put me in a different room and I was trying to navigate some shitty menus and like solve the crime or whatever. I kept thinking that when I turned around that he would be there threatening the child. And I realized that's very, very, very important when we talk about especially blended reality stuff. You are creating memories in people's minds with that technology. Like when you see something happen in your living room, behind the lenses and it's blended into your reality, the chemicals in your brain that make actual memories store it as an actual physical fact. Like, I don't remember Journey as a memory of a real place. I remember it as a game because I've seen it on a television in my living room.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You know, but
And
when I
that's
see Journey all around me, I can feel in it, but it's still not my reality. If I saw Journey happening in my living room, then when I look back at my living room, I would remember my living room as having the Journey in it. And that is such an awesome thing and so scary. It's a huge, huge realization for me. Like, I walked away from VRDC thinking like, oh my God, like, you know, the idea of feeding your head, that what you put in your head becomes you.
Right.
It's becoming real. You know, it's the Black Mirror thing. You know, it's like, oh, it's really, there's a visceral reaction to embodiment, and particularly in blended reality environments. And I think it's a huge responsibility for game designers. So that's actually why I gave the talk, because I want people to start to really think about the body chemistry and the brain chemistry. Like, if we all just like make the, you know, the queen pose, we put our hands up like this and you open your solar plexus, like, it just feels good. You just feel good when you do it. And when you hunch down over your computer and you're doing your email and you're not breathing, like, that feels really bad, right?
Yeah.
We have to think about this as we're responsible now for that whole process.
Yeah.
Real quick, Ben, I just wanted to throw it to you real quick. I don't know if you were at BRDC this week. I didn't see you there, but if you weren't, have you thought at all about some of these same stuff that Robin was talking about? Because you've got a pretty, your game is not shoot things and pick up things, right? Now it's very peaceful and meditative.
It's an experience.
It's an experience.
But at the same time, it's full of destruction. So yeah, no, I think about it a lot. I mean, my path to kind of, I wish I could have been there. It sounds like a great talk, but definitely similar themes as I've like kind of been working in VR and gone through the process of like, okay, first you have to use a gamepad because there's no other solution, and then, you know, getting a hold of these controllers. And it took me a while to kind of really understand how powerful, you know, hands in VR, you know, really can be. It actually took me working with it for a while and just kind of like trying demos and stuff and be like, okay, yeah, I'm getting used to this. And then I went back to a VR system that didn't have hands, and I was like, I think I'm in a movie. Like, I can't, you know, like I can't reach out and do anything. And that was like really kind of profound. And I went back to my game design. I was like, start over, you know, like redesign everything around the hands and the body. Because that's everything.
So I apologize. Due to the earlier technical issue, I don't think we'll be able to get gameplay footage of your game up here, but because it's what causes the stream to crash a little bit. But sorry. So Irrational, it's not your game, but it's my street. Like I said earlier, tin can setup here. But so Irrational Exuberance, you're in this middle of this like voided space, like you're in the middle of this like this asteroid in the middle of space. It's really cool. But then when you reach out with the Vive controllers, you're starting to break apart the asteroid you're in. And I watched some people play it at IndieCade, because you brought us to IndieCade where I got to see it for the first time. And how did you sort of like make, like, you just talked about how like once you got touch it you couldn't go back. But how did you think about like not using like all you've got is just the controllers floating about? You don't seem to have any interactions yet. How did you think about what interactions belong in that meditative space?
I mean, you know, my design goal is never, I want to like not do violent things in general, but also like kind of going as simple as possible, you know, like I don't want people thinking about buttons, right? Because like they do kind of map to actions in a way, but as soon as I've tried a few things with it, and it's like as soon as you show a little bit of UI and you're like, okay, you know, something happens when I pull the trigger. Now all of a sudden, you know, the person is just like, well, what can I grab? That's like what I'm supposed to do here. And the experience is really not about that. It's about, you know, kind of discovering all those layers and going through a you know, that process for yourself. And it's amazing to me how you know, the precision, we get like sub-millimeter precision right out of our heads and hands now with this technology, and that level of fidelity we've never had. Like, it's just kind of magic that we can do that, you know, like nothing in the real world really, like, I mean, you have to touch it, right? But now we can do things where I'm not touching, and yet it still knows that I'm, you know, 23.2 millimeters away, and we can use that information for like, you know, really fantastical things. And in my experience, the way it's been built with you see some small asteroids floating in front of you, and you're sort of curious, well, what happens? This is like 0G. It's probably going to move, but it actually crumbles in front of you, and that kind of like just encourages you to reach out more and more. And that process was very just kind of intuitive and organic as I tried different things and was like, hey, this might work, and throw things against the wall. So it's not the most efficient way to get there, but
yeah, I was just going to say we had the same experience, like with the star puzzles in Luna. It was the same thing where we started off trying. I was like all game designer mode, like, okay, it's got to be hard and there's symmetry, and like I designed all these puzzle systems that were super difficult, and then I put people in the experience and they were like, they just grab a star and move it, and then they just be like, this is the best. And I'm like, oh God, like everything I just designed is going to go exactly against that feeling of, wow, I just want to do this, man. Like it's like the glow sticks guy at the party, right? Like they're doing that, and then I'm like, now use your brain and think about where this puzzle's going to end up. Like that's, nobody wants to feel that. And so it is really, I think that process that Ben is describing is the intuitiveness that you have to engage in when you start to test your own game in VR. You're like, oh, right, I am a monkey. Like I thought that this was going to be really cool if I made it hard, but I just really need to embrace the fact that it's experiential. There was an Edar talk actually at VRDC where he said two things. The kinds of experiences that are going to be successful in VR are accessible applications that make your life better, and transformative, transportative, accessible experiences for entertainment. And transportative, it doesn't mean like you get to solve everything and feel like a genius, or that you like feel triggered all the time and you're trying to fight this guy by punching him in the face.
Yeah.
Not for a lot of people.
Yeah.
It's Oh no! I mean, I have this is like an old, well-worn insight at this point. But I feel like what I was thinking about, Ben, when you're talking about having like sub-millimeter tracking accuracy and the ability to see where people's hands are, like that's a level of game designer watching the player that I don't think we've ever seen before, and it's sort of unsettling to think about it in that perspective. Because when you're playing a traditional game on a console or a handheld, like you're at a remove and you're interacting, and the game designer is watching you and responding to you, but they're responding to your decisions, not to your actual body. And now all of a sudden, you guys have the power, if you want, to sort of like put something behind somebody, or cause something to happen when they move their arm a certain way, and that is like kind of unsettling, and that's something I think a lot of designers don't think about in a traditional sense.
It's giving people the power to really to reshape the reality that you're in, and that's like giving someone that kind of consent is that's a big step. Right now we have jump scare games, and I will never play one because it will give me nightmares forever. And we have relaxation games, and they're like at the ends of that spectrum, right? Like one person's like, come on in, I'm gonna like play some cool yoga music and show you some, or like outer space. Yeah, it's gonna be
chill
awesome. Yeah, and then there's the other one that's like, I'm putting you in outer space in a helmet where you can only see like this, and then stuff jumps at you, right?
Yeah.
So like, I feel like we're gonna have to move to the middle. Like both of those are pretty easy. Like totally relaxed with no goals is pretty easy. Totally scary and like taking advantage of your like naivete about that kind of a space is also totally easy. But as people get anesthetized to just like chill out or freak out, what's in the middle? And I think that my next game that I'm working on now is about how do you take traditional gameplay ideas, like say from an RPG, and bring them into a space that is surreal and different and make that meaningful to somebody, because I really do want to do a real game that doesn't feel like it's threatening and overwhelming to people.
Right. It's interesting when you were talking about when you were in game designer mode, and then you put someone in there and the puzzles were too complicated and people were just kind of happy to move things around. Because that reminds me of my first experience in VR when Oculus was still a piece of prototype hardware. And I think it was like a demo in the Rage engine. And there's all this stuff going on, but I just remember this textured cube that I was like, and just looking around it, it's just such a new thing for a lot of people, and I think it's going to be interesting for game developers and designers, because they're making games that have to move along with the expectations of the audience who is new to this medium, or whatever you want to call it. So yeah, I don't know. Good luck with that.
Yeah, I mean, it's like when films were first made, right? When they would show the train film and people would jump out of the seats because they thought the train was going to hit them. Like, we're kind of in that place right now with VR and AR, and especially with AR. Like, we did this little game called World for the Tango Fab 2 Pro phone. It's the first Tango phone. It's a Lenovo phone that just came out this week. And when we were working on it, Kato, who's the designer, was like, oh, he's like, what should we do? And I was like, well, we could do like a Tamagotchi thing where you look around, and he's like, oh, so boring. Like, we really have to. And I was like, no, we could do whatever you want. And he immediately was like, can I do this? And starts taking the phone and looking up at the ceiling and being like, can I put stuff on the ceiling? Can I put stuff on the walls? Like, he immediately started questioning the nature of reality. Like, there's no gravity in this place, so let's do all this weird shit. And that's, I think, what you have to be in that level of like, okay, totally break expectations as a designer. But then when you see normal people, regular people, muggles using it, even the simplest thing of like putting a flower on their desk and then watching rain turn it into a flower and then opening the flower and getting a present out of it, for them, that's like, it's mind blowing. It's like, it might as well be the holodeck. Like, they're completely overwhelmed with excitement by things that as designers we're like, oh, it's not the holodeck yet, but I guess it's okay. So I think you have to really be thinking about yourself that way.
Yeah.
It's just, I don't know. It's interesting. I was in the World's Talk, and his name escapes me.
Ha is his name.
Yes, and he was talking about some design considerations and using like the fact that people can be anywhere in AR. Like, I'm in a room right now that there's like a huge desk and a bunch of chairs and there's not much room, but maybe I want to get my phone out and use AR. And just the consideration that they have to give to the physical space, the consideration they have to give like drawing attention. So there's like an interesting thing in that game where rain's coming down and then you're going to naturally look up. There's a cloud up there. Just the way that the design has to, and it's like that in like 2D games too. It's a challenge drawing player attention to what you want them to see. But when you're using it in the physical space that has been like reconstructed on your phone, it's just pretty fascinating stuff that like we're already hitting.
Yeah.
Well, and actually, there's a really good book I have here called "Designing Disney's Theme Parks," and it's all about the nature of theme park design and how really what you're doing is you're building architecture for consent. Like, you're building pathways through the space so that I think that the phrase they use is architectures of reassurance. So the idea that like when I wander towards the Space Needle in Tomorrowland or whatever, I know that as I'm getting closer to it that I'm going to get a space experience. And they change the audio as you're moving along the path. They start to put more and more objects that represent that experience in the landscaping. And then eventually when you get there, you're like, oh, and now I'm here. And they're building this sort of curve, a natural expectation curve into everything from the way that the things are painted, the way that they're arranged, to the images and even the flowers that they choose. It's all designed to make you feel more futuristic. And then when you move away from Tomorrowland into like, say, the storybook land, you're getting little miniature characters and like dolls and stuff, and they're playing tinkly music. And it's like, oh, the teacups are around the corner, and you're building that expectation. And in Journey, we did a lot of that. I used the book a lot when we were working on it to sort of communicate, okay, this is how we're going to lead players through the space. So they don't just run to the edge of the world and then get blown back all the time, which is what, happens if you don't do it right. And I think that Disneyland and theme parks and immersive experiences in the real world are actually going to be a big design touch point for designers in this environment moving forward.
Ben, can you talk about, have you been able to think about that in your work at all? And sort of, how do you approach immersive design? Because I think that's what we're talking about here.
How often do you go to Disneyland, Ben? I know you're in LA.
Of course.
It's too scary for me. I don't go.
Well, actually, real quick, why is Disneyland too scary for you? Because if Robin's going to very rightfully say Disneyland has less for VR, but then you say, oh no, Disneyland scares me a little. Like that actually does mean something.
Well, that was kind of in jest, but actually, if you go there, sometimes there's people there that are like inside the skin of other people walking around.
Oh my God.
I suppose so, yeah.
And that freaks little kids out, right? They know there's something weird going on there. And they're like,
you ruined Disneyland for
me.
You just ruined it for all 8 people.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, no, I mean, I was just thinking of back to your, there's a lot of early demos. As soon as you get positional tracking and like hands and stuff like that, there's a lot of the early demos that are like, oh, they're trying to make you look at all this cool stuff. And then, everyone ends up looking at the chair they're sitting on because it's like within this range and you get this beautiful parallax and you've never seen it before in a digital space. And you're like, wow, this is so cool. And like, the designers are like, wait, why aren't you looking out here? And so some of that I wonder is, just a product of like how novel it is. On the other hand, like I feel like a lot of the discussion and like, the kind of wrangling that game designers are doing right now is coming from a legacy of 3D, which is predominantly about, you're looking at a screen and everything is really, far away from the character, right? You're like, where am I going to go in the landscape? I'm going to go over there. Who am I going to shoot? What, like it's about distance. And so you run up to a wall and it's like the least interesting thing in the world, right? Like nothing close to you is generally that interesting, except, maybe a key object every once in a while. And now like as soon as it's interesting, VR happens at different like levels. If you don't have positional tracking on your head, it kind of like, as soon as you put something in front of someone, they're going to want to like kind of look around it. And if you can't do that, you're going to get nauseous. But if you do have positional tracking and also motion tracking, like all of a sudden the space around you becomes extremely important, and that kind of like intimacy of the local space, it's just like it's so foreign to the way that we've been designing for so long that it's like there's just like entire classes of design that don't exist yet that I think will. I mean, Job Sim's a great example of like good design in that space, and it's like there's
now for watching.
Yeah, it's just touch all the things, right? That feeling of touch all the things is a pleasurable experience. I think sometimes that like I have a real obsessive interior decoration thing where I love to collect stuff and put it all around me and have like I'm that lady on the hike that's like, no, I have to pick up these rocks. No, wait, I'm sorry, I have to take this photo. I like to collect things, and I have a lot of mementos and stuff like that in my house. And I think that compulsion and sort of set decorating that I do in my life all the time is becoming very handy in VR, because I really spend a lot of time thinking about like, okay, what little objects is going to be in this space for you to like touch all the things,
I think that it keeps on coming up in what we're talking about, and it's that the hands are such because that's who you are in VR is your hands. And we're looking at Job Simulator, and they got the big white gloves. It was interesting hearing at one of the panels at VRDC, Cy Wise from Alchemy was talking about different approaches they were trying to use with hands. And initially, they must have been, I don't know if they're prototyping Job Simulator or what, but they tried realistic hands. And she was just like, they're just gross looking and veiny.
Gross little puppet hands.
Yeah. So in Job Simulator, like giant white gloves. And she said something like, when we made hands that are nobody's hands, then we made hands that are everybody's hands. So then you got these big things that they're also very good from a design standpoint, and they look nice art-wise. But it's Could you imagine like Job Simulator with all the same art right now, but with realistic hands? You know what? I want to be surprised if Alchemy came out with some kind of DLC. $5.
It would be cool if it was the tiny hands one, where it was just like his hands holding two little tiny hands.
Oh no!
You can get as gruesome as you want with the realistic hands.
I would totally play that.
I do have one question for both Ben and Robin related to yet another VRDC talk, because we're sort of talking about VRDC after the fact here. So watching the Job Simulator footage that's playing down below, what I'm suddenly reminded of is I've heard a few stories about how when QAing VR games, developers have run into challenges where, because they literally weren't tall enough or short enough to break the game in a certain way, it would be a hard time repoing certain bugs. And that was a very practical way to discuss that problem. But there was also a talk at VRDC that talked about accessibility in VR, which deals not just with the things we discussed, but it talked about when you're dealing with accessibility, you're talking about the player who is 6'7", you're talking about the player in the wheelchair. I forget, it was Brian something who was on that panel, along with some other great developers. But he was a he was a developer who uses a wheelchair, and he was talking about the things he's experienced in VR and trying like it's harder for him to play Job Simulator, for instance, because he's not able to walk around. This is just the tip of a very big iceberg, and we could probably hold another panel long talk about it. But can you sort of quickly give me your thoughts about making your games accessible?
Well, I definitely have thought about this, both with World and Luna. So when we first showed World at Google I/O, a woman in a wheelchair came up to me afterwards and was asking me, she's like, will I be able to like use this at my height? You know, do I have to be able to be close to the ceiling? And I was like, no, actually the magic of AR is that if you get a good mapping camera, you can basically use it on any surface you want. So you can play it at your height. So that means that it's ageless, and in terms of standing, sitting, being in a wheelchair, being in a chair, whatever, you're totally good. And a lot of the stuff we made so that you could put it where you wanted to be and then play with it. So there's like a little house, and when you lean into the house, the door is open and then the little character comes out. And you can do that on your table. You can do it on the floor and get down and do it if you're a little kid. Yeah. Or you can do it standing up, you know, put it on the kitchen table and then just walk over to it, you know. Yeah. So the thinking about that and having that conversation with her early on in the development was very helpful. And then with Luna in particular, my next game will have sort of motion through three-dimensional spaces in it, but this one does not, for a very specific reason, which is that when people haven't used VR before, they don't know how to relate their body to the space. And so we decided to make all of the terrariums basically be like little floating globes in front of you that are very delicate and easy to look into. And all the puzzles would be looking up at the sky. So the poses that you would have with your body would be looking up, feeling open, and then looking down and feeling like kind of crafty and creative. But those were the two goals for the experience. And so I really have thought a lot about the accessibility of just having a simple space in front of you, like a toy set, is just more universal than traversing a 3D space, you know, with a character and stuff. That stuff is already like, you're already getting into a lot more expertise in terms of how to move through video games and spaces that are not familiar. And it felt to me, for the kind of people I want to reach, which are first time users who I can evangelize to and say, hey, this is a great space, you should make games for it too. That really reducing movement and making it be much more like a dollhouse or toy set would be more accessible.
Ben, how have you thought about this problem?
Yeah, it's a pretty big trick for irrational exuberance, because the design of it is really kind of trying to maximize your embodiment in a space, and like pushing room scale as much as possible, because I find that like really helps you get lost in it, and you kind of, you know, you take a couple steps and you still are in a virtual space, and you're like, you know, it's a really interesting space to explore. However, that obviously presents a lot of problems for certain people. So I think, you know, there's a lot more work to do there. But the nice thing, well, actually, the double-edged sword with irrational exuberance is it's kind of like it's grounded just enough in reality that it gives you some reference points and a little bit of things to hang on to, but it's also a very broad kind of, you know, palette. And so certain things have been abstracted, you know, intentionally, and kind of made surreal, because it's, you know, it's meant to be a space that you don't quite understand, and it's kind of all about coming to grips with like the knowing and the unknowing, and then like flipping that again on you. And so that gives us, I think, the ability to, you know, although we're kind of designing for lots of movement and whatnot, that like we could put in different sets of, you know, settings and parameters that kind of just abstract it in different ways. So it's like, you know, if you aren't capable of doing that, there's like, you know, some tweaks we can make to let you move virtually around the space and abstract it a bit. And I think it'll still provide like a great experience, because it's, you know, although you are using your body, you know, you don't see a body, right? And you don't see veiny hands.
Or tiny.
So,
Yeah.
Right. Well, you might see tiny hands later. That's the reveal.
I think that should become like a developer joke in VR and AR apps, that like there's just a tiny hands mod for everything.
Yeah.
We should start this trend. Like the burrito is the exit.
Oh, the burrito exit is classic.
You know what this reminds me of is Chris, you mentioned a while ago, you know, like in VR you are your hands. Like that's right now mostly what you see, if anything, is a floating pair of hands. But really, like I think something we don't think about a lot is that you're your head too. And
Yes.
this reminds me, I was in a talk at VRDC by Olivier Palmiere, who is the designer on Eagle Flight for Ubisoft Montreal, and he's super excited about head movement. I mean, that whole game, if anyone has seen it, and I know we don't have clips of it, is that you navigate by turning your head around, and he was so enthusiastic about the idea that like the human head is in a sense the most sensitive and most reactive controller you have, because there's no millisecond delay for a thought to go from your head to your fingers to the gamepad to whatever. You just do it, and it feels very natural and very comfortable. And I wonder how many designers are even now just like sorting out what they can do with head movement and what they shouldn't be doing with head movement in VR and AR.
Yeah, that's actually a really good thing, especially for AR, because like AR field of view is pretty narrow. So a lot of things that you end up experiencing in it are, you're like, oh, I'm trying to move the little box of the field of view to the play. Oh, there it is. Oh God, a scorpion. Tap, tap. You know, and then like a laser shoots out of your forehead and like kills it. You know, and you're like, oh, okay, now I'm going to move the little box over here, and it really does feel like it's as if someone, you know, like when you go to the eye doctor, they put the little post out, and then there's a card on it that you read the stuff off of. It feels like someone's done that they've taken a little tiny anglerfish angle and then put a little box on it, and like every time you move around, you're moving that space. And so the temptation is like, ooh, well, since that's what we have to get people to do, we'll design a whole game around micro moving this box. When really what you want is you want to give someone something to focus on, in my opinion, and then you hear something and you just kind of like, like anything that requires precision movement of the box is going to make you feel like a fucking robot, right? Anything that just like pings your awareness, like, you know, you catch something out of the corner of your eye and then you look over, like that's how people really move, you know? And then you finger tap.
And then scorpion.
Yeah, it's like, I mean, there's a lot of gaze-directed stuff, you know, like on gear and on, you know, some of the devices that, like, that's kind of your major form of input. It's like it knows where you're looking, and that's kind of it. And I experimented with that a bunch, you know, back in the DK1 days, and it's like, it's pretty novel, you know, and it's pretty cool that you can do that, but it's also not something like you don't control things with your head in real life. And so it's kind of fun at first, but it's like kind of also tiring, right? It gets kind of old quickly, and it's like, okay, you know, really, I would, you know, probably prefer to abstract that a little bit, or, you know, use my hands. And that was one of the realizations for me. I was like doing a lot of that kind of stuff. I was like, this is cool. You know, it is intuitive if you don't have anything else. But, you know, really the way you do relate to the real world is, you know, we thought about the screen and eyesight for so long, and to a lesser extent ears, but you know, the way you actually interact with the world is like 99% your hands, right? Like you don't pick up things with your feet very often. It's like hands, everything, you know.
Well, and if you think about a baby, when they're learning how to sort of process the inputs that they're getting through their eyeballs and their skin, right? You know, for a while, they just are constantly always looking around at everything and kind of drooling on themselves. And then at some point, they start to get locomotion. And the first thing that they do is they keep touching their body. So they keep bringing their feet to their mouth and like touching themselves and like touching other surfaces. They get really picky about hot and cold around that time. And then they start to move their hands as graspers, right? And when kids start to identify the fact that their hands are attached to their body, then all they want to do is pick up everything, right? And that's when you're like, no, don't kill yourself. Like, oh my God, like your mother will kill me if you came over to Annie's house and you died. Like, don't pick up that sharp object. That's not for you. And this is like, you know, this is where we are right now in the developmental curve. In fact, I quoted Genova when I was giving my talk, because he used to say that when we were making Journey. He was like, whenever you put people in a new interactive environment, they're like babies. Like they're going to go around and they're going to poke, because they're going to want to know what the boundaries of the space are. And I think now that we have hands, we really, you know, what I was trying to say was, I want to encourage more stroking and less poking. Less finger tapping, more like, you know, wiping through the space, balletic gestures, you know, softness. But I think that is a very accurate point, that we've spent a lot of time building environments where people are poking or shooting from a disembodied posture. So then we're like, oh, well, we'll just have them poke and shoot from inside here.
I think Ben's coming back with some handsets here for some reason.
All right, let's see.
Are you making a point?
I just wanted
5 controllers.
I wanted to see if I could get this working, streaming some stuff, because it might be relevant.
Yeah,
that would be cool.
Good luck.
If you can get, let me know if you once you can get basically like I said before, all I need is you can send your gameplay footage through the Hangout. I will click it live. But
Yeah,
yeah,
and what I would love to know is what you guys have learned about designing for player fatigue and player attention spans in VR and AR, because Ben was talking about how as cool as it is that you can move your head around and that can be tracked so closely, like it can be very tiring to look around. And I was actually in another talk at VRDC from the guy who I think was the lead on Eve Gunjack, and he was like, we had to learn to design the game around people's neck strength. So like basically they determined that it was more comfortable to look side to side than to look up and down. So all the menus revolve around in front of you at a set depth rather than making you look up. And so as you guys have figured out how to make cool, fun, touchable, strokeable AR, VR games, like has it been tricky to navigate like the limits of the human body and your players?
For me personally, the biggest problem I've had is that the experience of Luna, when you put the create mode and the puzzle mode together and you let someone just go into it unconstrained, people will lose time and spend 45 to 50 minutes in it without even noticing, because they're so engrossed and it's such a relaxing experience. So I've had the opposite problem of like when we were getting ready to show it at PAX and Oculus wanted a 10-minute demo for their stations, I wasn't really quite sure how to constrain the experience so that people would still feel the same relaxation but also be moving through at a clip, And so one of the things I've been thinking a lot about is how much feedback, audio feedback and tactile feedback about the world space drives this sense of completion in the experience. And I think that Ben might have some really interesting thoughts about that with Irrational Exuberance, because it is about giving them that sense of progress, right, without giving them directed feedback.
Ben, did you get the game up over here?
I think so. Can you? I'm going to do a little bit of stuff, and if you can see it,
yeah. It says the headset's not tracking, so I think
Grant's on another plane of reality.
Yeah. One microsecond.
Yeah, we're gonna give Ben a moment here to hop in. I just want to say
never before seen on Gamasutra live stream.
A live stream.
Oh man, I think we're getting something.
You seeing anything?
Yeah, we see it.
Not the best quality, but you know what?
We've seen it.
With it.
No, it's working.
All right, this is amazing. Actually, thanks for going through this, Ben.
Sure.
While Ben is demonstrating what's up with Irrational Exuberance, I just wanted to point out that from that Eagle Flight talk that Alex mentioned, they were so committed to like getting the head right and getting the inner ear right that the only way to do a flip in the flight for Eagle Flight, to like do a barrel roll or a loop to loop, whatever, is to do one with the headset on, and it actually works. And the guy on stage said he'd done it. So that was pretty incredible.
It sounds like Barf City for me.
Yeah, it seems like I'd get really sick doing that.
But he did it. He said he jumped. He had a little graphic. He said, "Oh yeah, I tested this and it worked." So, and it wouldn't be Barf City if you were used to doing those hand jumps then. But I guess that would be.
It'd be Barf City for me. I get.
So Ben, talk us through what's going on here with Irrational Exuberance and why you wanted to play it right now.
So the thing that I thought was kind of interesting was what we were talking about before. Well, first of all, I am getting some bugs because I think streaming is taxing the CPU, and so the physics are acting a bit strange. But so if you see something like really explosive happen after I touch something, it's that's not the way it's supposed to be. But yeah, effectively, you're kind of inside this cave at the beginning, and so you can see my hands have been abstracted a bit. They're just like these circles, because I didn't want you to like be really trying to grab. I just want you kind of gently investigating the world. And so what people tend to do is they'll see something floating like this and like, cool, 0G, and now they'll do that, and that's kind of cool. That was a little more abrupt than it should have been. But basically everything's like super brittle. So if I do that, my back.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm just tapping things, and it turns out everything just breaks apart. Kind of the world's kind of very fragile. And so the interesting thing is, like, to our discussion earlier, is these are kind of like power. It's a power grip, and that is not supposed to happen. It's supposed to just kind of gently peel apart. The CPU is choking on the streaming right now, but it's really interesting to see, because not everybody, people react in very different ways, and they get, they start, punching and like doing that, but they also start, some people, you know, will find these little tiny fragments and they'll get really gentle and they get these micro movements and start doing this, you know?
Yeah.
And it's really fun to watch, and they start kind of juggling little pieces. And the fun thing about it is you can really kind of endlessly break. I don't know if you can see this really, but there's these tiny little fragments in front of me, and I can just keep kind of endlessly breaking them down. And you're pretty soon, you know, you're like full of this room of like
Particles.
Yeah, it's like it becomes like there's a lot of parallax, and it's really funny. You're like, now the room felt empty when you started, and now it feels full. And so like a lot of that is, you know, some of it's intentional and some of it's just like, yeah, again, like just trying things and discovering, oh wow, this is like a really nice little mechanic.
Yeah.
And then
I think
Can you
I was
go
going to
ahead
say that go ahead.
Ben, I was going to say, can you go ahead and start, providing it doesn't break the game, can you start opening up the shell that you're in? Because that was for me, like, that was where it was like, oh, shoot, like, that was where something cool was happening with the VR design.
Right. So this is like, yeah, it's in lines with that kind of intuitive design. You know, there's no words, so it's not telling you to do any of this. You just kind of want to touch stuff, and either at this point, you know, I mean, or earlier, people usually will see the walls and think, huh, well, that looks like the same material, and they'll reach out and touch it, or they'll do it on accident, just in the course of moving around. But yeah, so if you touch the walls, you do that, and you're like, wait a minute, what's going on? So this is a spoiler moment. Sorry.
No worries.
You're in
So
space.
you can like stick your head out, and you can just kind of like open the whole world up. What's it
like for both of you? Because it's interesting watching you play the game, this thing that you made, and you still kind of seem slightly awestruck by some of the things that you're doing. So question for both of you, what's it like when you first kind of get into your game's world that you were making, and then it's just kind of, you're engulfed by it?
It's real.
I honestly cried. I did. Like the first time that I saw the game in 3D VR with touch controllers, Martin had done a prototype with very, very, very early prototype controllers that we got from some friends there, like right before the holidays. And as soon as I saw it, I just started crying. I was like, oh my God, this is what it looks like in my mind. Like when I imagine people playing with the space and this little bird coming to life in this little delicate universe made to kind of look like animating paper, like this is what it looks like in my mind. And I just started getting all teary-eyed. I was like, I can't believe this. This is so much better than looking at it in Maya on a 2D screen. Like it's a real object, and like this is going to revolutionize the way that we think about digital objects. It's a sculpture. It's like a living, breathing sculpture. And I think what Ben is building is a sculpture that you make and then break and then reimagine over and over and over again. Like I think of Irrational Exuberance as being like a very sculptural and abstract experience that really is about that sense of embodiment without rules, without preconceived notions of what you're supposed to do, without the kind of stress of being in a game environment that you need to figure out, which is very similar to the feeling of being in that body as an infant and learning to grow and experience the world and understand all of the awe-inspiring realities of physics in reality, right? I mean, it's the idea of the exuberance coming from that sense of exploration is, I think in some ways it's very childlike and it's deep, you know, like when I started tearing up looking at my own design in three-dimensional space, it was because it felt like I had made a real thing, you know, like it's a real thing now. It's kind of like the very first time I had a game on a shelf at GameStop, you know, I went to GameStop and I was like, oh my God, like there it is, you know, like they took all these photos of it, like sent it to my parents. Like I did a real thing. It's really there. You can spend $50.
I exist.
I'm real.
I created.
Exactly. And so for me, it was very similar to making physical art, which I also do. It feels to me very similar and moving in that way.
Just because we're getting short on time here, Ben, do you have an answer for Chris's question about what it was like to see Irrational Exuberance for the first time?
I almost can't remember the first time, but yeah, I don't know. What I can say about like continuing to work in it is like at this point, you know, there's still quite a bit of looking at screens, like you do a lot of demoing and you see it on the screen, you're watching somebody play, and you're designing things on a screen. And even now, like I've been doing it for a while, and I feel like, yeah, I know what's happening there. I can see it. I built that. No big deal, whatever. And then I get in it, and it's like, God, this, like every single time, it's like more vivid than I remember, and it's more like it's much more of a thing than it looks like. I got some other experiments, a piece that I collaborated with my partner, Kate Parsons. It's called 3VR, and it's super abstract. It's like video art that's become spatial and mapped onto objects. And her video art is extremely colorful and detailed. And like you just like look at it on the screen, and you're like, yeah, okay, I think I kind of get that. And I know what it is. Like I've been in it so many times, and yet every single time I go in it, I'm just like, it looks so good, and it feels so good to be in the space with these things. It's just not. It doesn't even compute to like. You can't, like, literally, I just, in some ways, when somebody's like, so what's your VR thing about? I'm like, I don't even want to say anything at all anymore. I'm like, I can't explain it to you. You just have to.
You have to try it. Yeah, it's that same feeling of like words don't work for game design. That's what makes the medium so great and so terrifying for designers, is that words don't describe what you're doing. You have to play it, you have to feel it, you have to make the decisions. And this just, I think it amplifies that. It turns it up to like 11.
Yeah.
Right on.
I really, really hate to say this, but we're out of time. It is 1 o'clock, and it has been a great hour here with you both. I think it's just been so cool to hear this week and on this show about the way of virtual reality. Like it's, you always have to, as a reporter, you have to sort of keep the hype shields up. You have to like be able to like spend so much time sifting through what about VR is like meaningful and what is sort of salesy, if you will. And getting to sort of hear you both talk about your work in this way has been really great today. So thank you both for coming on.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. So thanks to both Ben and Robin. Upcoming games from Phenomena. That's Luna and Worlds just released.
That's right.
And then
sometime in the future.
yes. All looking forward to it. And Ben with Irrational Exuberance. I'm Chris Graft, editor-in-chief, Gamasutra.com. Then there's also Alex over there.
I've been Alex for Gamasutra.com. Thank you both so much.
And I am Bryant Francis, contributing at Gamasutra.com. Thank you all for coming. Have a wonderful day, and we'll see you in virtual reality.